When you talk to brands and stuff, how do you advise them on how to approach TikTok?
For TikTok specifically, like we were kind of saying before, people are looking for the most real, authentic version. This is not a place to like get on with like your like buttoned up, perfectly curated PR statement. You know what I mean? This is a place to come on and be a human and share. And I also will go out on a limb and say I don't really think TikTok is a place to heavily advertise. You can, but I think it is a lot more beneficial to just focus on the content creation and let people come to you. I mean, Duolingo is like a great example of this, where like they're not saying like download the app. I mean, maybe once every like 20 videos, but it's mostly just that owl costume, like going around and being unhinged and like having fun and being silly. And now people, of course, are very aware of Duolingo. It's because that owl is just creating good content every day.
Welcome back to The Marketing Factor. I'm Austin Dandridge, the CEO of Cobble Hill, a marketing agency based in Charleston, South Carolina, specializing in direct-to-consumer digital marketing and email marketing. Today, I'm joined by Sarah Kleist from New York, and she's a performer turned digital strategist that realized that theater and marketing share kind of the same fundamental truth. It's all about telling compelling stories and moving audiences to action. Sarah, welcome to The Marketing Factor. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. That really like sums it up. I feel like I should steal that for my next intro of something.
Well, I'm fascinated by kind of your trajectory into marketing because you're an actress who just kind of like learning a little bit more about you. It's kind of a crazy story. You have a kind of an interesting timeline. You moved to New York in 2012 and started working as an actress, and then started working for restaurants, obviously, as actresses do, I'm sure. And then during the pandemic, the Broadway shut down, restaurants closed, and you started a design agency. I'd love to kind of like hear, where the acting background came from, and then how you just decided that design was your thing.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I've been an actor performer pretty much my whole life. Like my parents are musicians. I like grew up around artists my whole life. Like always knew like I wanted to sing and perform or whatever. So I moved to New York. It felt very like natural. Yeah, so as you said, like many actors, I worked in a restaurant for a long time. It's funny because when I look back on that time too, some of my major frustrations with the way that the restaurant was run, specifically by the owner, was like he would never niche down into like, and I was interacting with customers every single day. And I just felt like our biggest problem was the fact that he would never just like fully like niche into what their favorite part of the restaurant was. So it's funny now looking back, I'm like, LOL, like the most frustrating part for me was like the marketing of the restaurant. But yeah, so 2020 happened. Obviously New York City, like all the restaurants shut down, Broadway shut down, everything shut down. So like both sides of my life, my income and also my like passion were just like no longer for a minute. And I'm just not the type of person who can just sit and like twiddle my thumbs and doom scroll in my bedroom. So I immediately was like, okay, well, how can I use this time? Like, what can I be doing instead? What other things kind of interest me? And I kind of took the opportunity to learn all about the marketing world, start learning web design, start really playing with design for the first time. I have no design background, like formally. It kind of spiraled into a whole business, which is amazing.
How did you learn, where did you start to kind of like dive into this? To learn like the marketing side of things. And I mean, like, were you watching YouTube videos and stuff like that?
I was watching tons of YouTube videos, tons of like free courses on like sites like Coursera, like Skillshare, all that kind of stuff. And after a while, I started to get like I started to get the major like the core of what they were all trying to say. And because of my artist background, I felt like, oh, this is exactly what I've been doing the last like 10 years as an artist, trying to market myself to casting directors. It's just like I had to learn different terms to be used and like, like ROI and like KPIs and all this stuff. Of course, I didn't know those things as an actor, but the same like principles really apply to all creative endeavors. So, yeah.
How did you find, so, what was your first, how did you kind of land your first client?
hmm Well, it kind of was a slow burn because when I first started, I was just doing like actor websites, like my friends, and like I was doing them for complete free. Like I was just like, I'm bored, like let me help you do your website. And so we would launch their sites. They would, post about them when they were launched, and from there like other people started reaching out to me being like, wait, how much do you charge for this? And like it would be some actors, but then also some business owners, like, actors know more than just other actors. So it's kind of it kind of spiraled because people like my network was expanding, other people were getting eyes on my work. And yeah, so I think my first like business client I got because it was a friend of a friend who was an actor, um, who posted about their website and they needed some design help.
You have to think too, like probably during the pandemic, a lot of like actors and stuff, since they couldn't work, they were probably like, all right, let's focus on my own marketing. How can I do that? So I'm sure like people were reaching out to you. Then they're posting about, their new website or something like that. They're tagging you or however that is. And then it's kind of creates this chain of demand from that. That's interesting. I think it's super fascinating that you kind of have this acting background. Does that play into how you think about web design and brand storytelling? Like that, is there crossover there?
Yeah, I think like there's a lot of it's hard to explain. I think just because my brain, I'm so used to thinking in stories anyway. I'm so used to like okay, for example, when I'm in an audition, I am often um trying to look at myself through what they might be seeing, and trying to make sure that what I am portraying is like correct for the character or what they may want to see. And years and years of doing that has helped me in design because it's essentially the same thing, right? Like I'm designing through the lens of like, okay, what is their audience going to see? What are they going to click and scroll next? It's kind of like jumping into roles is like the same thing as jumping into like an ideal client's mindset for me. So that's where I think the kind of like connection point comes, but it's hard to explain like how I know like exactly where to put like a specific navigation like choice or the actual layout sections. But because it's all storytelling, I'm looking at it through the eyes of someone else. Like I think, yeah, I think it's the same skill set. I don't know. I feel like that's a bad explanation, but
But I do think you're right. Like when we started, so I started Cobble Hill in 2012, and we started out doing everything right from this perspective of branding. My background was in photography, video, graphic design. I lived in New York, worked for agencies up there, worked, as a freelance photographer, worked as a freelance designer up there, then worked for agencies. And so when I came down to Charleston, wanted to start this agency, there wasn't anyone that was kind of doing cool creative work and that had this, who was thinking about storytelling aspect of it. And I think my skills were okay from a graphic design standpoint. Like I have a good eye. I'm not a great graphic designer, but I feel like being able to tell the story sometimes is almost more important, and visualizing how a brand can kind of speak and tell a story that way is so much more important if to a certain degree of a brand building exercise than what your navigation looks like, or even like the type of typography that you choose sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Um, and things can kind of look a little rough, and there's always this growing thing, but you can't, but it's a lot harder to learn storytelling and get better at storytelling than it is just pure graphic design. So having to marry those two skills, I feel like it's like a really, it's something that I think clients value a lot because they can't, they have a hard time getting that sometimes.
Yeah, I so agree. And I also think like I have been now around so many like marketing folks who their biggest hurdle or their biggest question is like, how do I storytell better? Like what does that even mean? Like I've noticed like if I'm in Facebook groups or marketing driven, like communities, a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, like they'll post and they're being like, I need like storytelling help. And it's just so interesting because I'm like, it is funny how you can know like all the correct marketing terms and like have the training and all that stuff, but truly like the storytelling is like the part that I think a lot of people who come from a traditional marketing background struggle with sometimes. Not all, of course, like that's like kind of the whole gag of it. but
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying.
Well, I think too, it's, so now we don't do any website design or any branding. We just focus on running, paid digital ads and email marketing. And you have to, coming from this creative background where we're always so focused on the aesthetic or even the storytelling aspect or, the whatever it is, like just having something visually be great, bringing something into the digital marketing space where something is much more performance driven, especially because we work with a lot of e-commerce clients. They're expecting a return on ad spend, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with the branding of the ad itself. It's almost more of, there is this storytelling aspect that it's like, how do you tell your story to someone who's like in the market to purchase more, right? And it does transcend, and I feel like we get to almost be a little bit more creative sometimes because we're constantly shifting and creating new ads and new emails, and how can we talk about these products differently, which is what's kept it exciting versus sometimes just working on one brand and a website and things stay kind of, you can obviously update it, but it stays a little static for a bit.
For sure. I also think like with TikTok and everything too, I think people look for like like to stop a scroll now, it has to be so much more like authentic. There needs to be something like that really makes people think like, oh, this seems like it's going to be good content like that I actually want to watch. And oftentimes that's not like the most perfectly curated like graphic design either, which is funny coming out of my mouth because of course most of my work is designed, but yeah, no, I'm with you. It really is like, this is why I always say like marketing and theater are the same skill in different fonts because it is really just capturing attention.
Totally. I mean, I think you're 100% right. I think that stopping the scroll now, if it looks branded in any ways, people just are going to scroll through it, right? You look at one, a website for one certain type of product you might be interested in. Like, God forbid you're trying to buy a car, right? You get targeted for ads for cars for, it's crazy. And if what stands out, they all look the same, right? All the ads, whatever, it's always the same kind of aesthetic. But if it felt more in platform for like a car, if it's like someone talking about it, like, or doing something funny or whatever it is, like that, I feel like just kind of cuts through a little bit more because you're like, oh, that's actually like, this kind of feels like maybe it's a little bit more real, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Just like good content that people actually want to consume. Like I think people are so aware when like within a millisecond on TikTok or on Reels or whatever, if it's an ad. Like I know that when I'm scrolling and I see something that's like beautifully shot, like perfectly, like everything is like the color grading is amazing, all of that. Like I'm like, okay, that's an ad and I'm gonna scroll right away because I'm not on TikTok to watch ads. I'm on TikTok to be entertained or because I had a long day or whatever. So
Yeah, I mean, dig into that a little bit more. Like, what, from an acting perspective, your TikTok's obviously pretty cool too. I feel like you've done a really good job with your personal TikTok. Um, and I would imagine that being an actress is pretty impactful for that for sure. I feel like that's like marrying like two great worlds there. If let's say, so, when you talk to brands and stuff, how do you advise them on how to approach TikTok?
I think for TikTok specifically, like we were kind of saying before, people are looking for the most real, authentic version. Like this is not a place to like get on with like your like buttoned up like perfectly curated PR statement. You know what I mean? This is a place to come on and be a human and share. And I will go out on a limb and say I don't really think TikTok is a place to heavily advertise. You can, but I think it is a lot more beneficial to just focus on the content creation and let people come to you. So for example, like I mean Duolingo is like a great example of this where like they're not saying like download the app. I mean maybe once every like 20 videos they'll have something being like use our language app or whatever. But it's mostly just that dumb costume and that owl costume, like going around and being unhinged and like having fun and being silly. And now people, of course, are very aware of Duolingo. But not because they're like, oh, download our app every 2 seconds. It's because that owl is just creating good content every day. So yeah, I feel like it's more of like an awareness game on TikTok, a brand awareness, and less of like a like CTA driven like download our thing, buy our thing. Yeah. So and it's a long game with that.
100%. Like that's a big investment too. And I think that's kind of the trickiest thing for clients that are small businesses or, that they're just trying to start see growth on the e-com side. They're like, well, we're not a funny brand, right? We're not, our aesthetic is like cool shoes that are like $300 or something. Like, what should we be talking about on TikTok? And I think that the perspective of storytelling there is interesting, right? Like having I'm always like advocating for like get the founder on there, like talking about like you know it could it could be a day in the life. It could be anything really. It could be why you decided to use a specific type of fabric or something. I feel like the more invested in the like storytelling side of building the brands, then people get a bit more like they just feel like they're like brand advocates at that point. They're not being
Mm-hmm.
like told how to do something. They're like they're shown like why someone was inspired to do something a certain way, and then they feel like they've discovered something. It's really hard to get that across to
It
brands
is
sometimes though, because they want to just talk about, yeah,
their
what do you
product.
say that I think it's a hard like teaching lesson.
Yeah, I think the two most important things for TikTok is you have to have someone who's willing to be the face of the brand. Like, I think I think it's helpful, more helpful and most effective when you have one person who wants to be the consistent face. So if that's the founder, like oftentimes, that's great. But, if it's a bigger brand, you could hire someone like, the Washington Post has that one guy and he's been on it on the TikTok for like 4 years. And like you see his face and you're like, okay, yeah, you're the Washington Post guy. So like someone like that, even if it's not the founder, if you can hire someone who's like invested enough to stay with you for a long time and like grow themselves as the face, that's like the best thing. The other thing about TikTok is I think it's most successful when you have like a bit and when you have like a consistent bit. Like I think about the guy who always goes up to people and is like, I love your car. What do you do for a living? Like, I'm sure we've all seen those reels and TikToks. Um, that is like a consistent bit. He can do that every single day. He can post a new video with that bit every day. People are locked in. They want to know. Like people are fascinated by rich people. Like, it's great. Um, so like if you can find a bit that is repeatable that you could do every day that you become known for, I feel like that is like the best thing. And then if you can find something that's also on brand that would like consistently remind people of your brand while also giving them repeatable content like that they can associate you with, like that's literally the jackpot. Literally those two things: a consistent face and a repeatable bit.
So how do you think about the difference between platforms in this case, right? From one perspective, I have this feeling that like stuff trends on TikTok, then it comes over to, to Reels,
Yeah.
and then it like kind of dies on Twitter or something like that. And but like there is I feel just more of just create content, not necessarily for the platform, but create the content and put it out on everything. But people, I think, are like, where should I invest my time? Where should I invest my energy? Because it's so much. How do you how do you think about that? Like, because it's hard to be like good at everything, especially when you're a
Yeah,
small business or
for
medium
sure.
sized business.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to know like where your audience is. Like there's some businesses where I'm like, maybe you just don't need to be on, like if they're not interested in being on TikTok or they don't like their audience is like maybe older. I mean, there's a lot of like older generations on TikTok now. I don't mean to be like exclusionary in that way, but I do think like not every single brand needs to be on TikTok, but if anyone has an interest in being on TikTok and wants and but is also feeling like overwhelmed with the amount of content they have to create, I do feel like if you create for TikTok first and then repurpose to Reels, to me, cuz okay, let me get into it. For Instagram, I feel like Instagram to me is like a couple different platforms in one because you have the feed and then you have Reels. And to me, that is like two completely different strategies. For the feed for businesses, I feel like you can be a little more traditional in terms of your marketing. Like, I feel like if you're a business, you can have like the aesthetic feed, you can do your graphic design, you can like kind of make it almost a landing page of sorts. But for Reels, I would repurpose TikTok content there. And and then maybe on Instagram you can hide the reels from your feed, so you could post to feed but then like hide it from the profile grid or whatever. Like that's usually what I would suggest if you're trying to be in all of those places.
So tell me kind of, if you think about Reels, then how do you think about stories in that regard? From what's the difference there?
Okay, well, traditionally, like, okay, of course, like in elementary school, middle school, we're all taught that stories are, you have your beginning, your exposition, conflict, um, uh, climax, and resolution. So that is like, that part is the same, except for we have to reorder them. So on Reels and TikTok, normally what I say is you have to have your climax in the beginning, and then you can go to a little bit of exposition. So the climax is like the hook. Go back to a little bit of exposition, explain the hook a little bit, and then relive the rest of your story. So you kind of have to like do it a little out of order and rewire your brain for that. But I think it takes a little practice. But once you kind of get there, then you're like, oh, okay, great. I know how to create great content for this.
I love that. I feel like you should just help brands create TikToks and
It's funny because I used to I there was a time in my life where I was like, I want to be one of the like a face for these big brands that like I wanted to be like the Washington Post guy on TikTok. And maybe I mean maybe there's a future for that, but I am really loving my design era right now. But yeah, no, I love that. I feel like the more that brands are realizing this and realizing how important it is to be like to have someone be this person for them, I think yeah, that would be a fun thing. I'm not writing it off, but thank you.
well, so I it's funny, like, so we had this whole, like I said, we were this web design agency with branding and all of this stuff. And 4 years ago or 3 years ago, I basically wrote, we launched a new website. We I wouldn't say we got rid of all of our developers, but we essentially like didn't we stopped building out our web development team and started focusing on building out our marketing team.
Hmm.
And we had always prided ourselves in custom websites and nothing can be templatized or anything like this. And Squarespace just constantly was getting better and better, I thought. And I was kind of getting sick of building custom themes for WordPress. And so eventually I was just like, well, let's do this. Let's launch our website on Squarespace, right? And I wrote a blog post like 3 or 4 years ago that was basically like why I did it and where I felt like the future of web design, at least for small businesses, was headed, which it was a what you see is what you get type style editor that focused more on good content and less about bells and whistles from from front end mechanics of how things look and feel, because that was getting pretty homogenized in terms of templates being able to do that. And I think that thesis has relatively held true, because the way that I see it, especially with AI, there it's become so easy to code things from basically a personless place, that you have these templates that, yes, they're templates, but it's still just like drawing or something. It's not like you can still create things that feel fundamentally unique based on the content. So I'm wondering if you ever like, do you see that trend continuing? I mean, it seems like you do, because you've a big emphasis of your business is focusing on templatized style websites. But do you think that it holds back certain characteristics of a website sometimes if you're utilizing a template?
I think it depends. So, like, I work with a lot of service based businesses in like luxury creative services. So, like, I work with like interior designers or wedding photographers or stylists or people like that, where it's like their clientele is paying a lot of money for their creative, like, advising or consulting or one-on-one work. Um, and for most of those people, I think a templatized website can work. I do a lot of template customization because the platform I design on is called Show It. I actually used to design on Squarespace and then I switched to Show It just because it was like there's more creative freedom there. But when I do template customization, it's mostly just I like starting with like somewhere. Like I like having something to start with, and then I feel like it frees my brain up so much more to help them figure out what makes them unique. So um my template customization clients usually never end up with a site that looks templatey, and because there's so many templates on the market, I'm like, why do we need to start from scratch? Like, most I still do some custom work for clients who are like really interested in having that and are interested in the artistry and like commissioning like a custom site, which I still love doing, but I don't think most businesses need it, quite honestly. There's so much on the internet, so many resources on the internet. um, and yeah, oftentimes depending on the web builder, you can move sections around, you can do all this stuff. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of the the template movement. If not only because it gets people's sites up faster and then they sell faster and they have their ROI faster and their business grows faster. So yeah, that's where I'm at with the template world. And I think it will continue to be that way. I'm curious to see how AI impacts web design. I have yet to see an AI web builder that looks good, but
Yeah, no,
that's just
totally.
that's just me being like shady. But I'm sure eventually it will one day come down the line, and I am curious to see what happens when that happens.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think, design and AI are, to me, very hard to convince me that AI is ever going to take the place of true artistic design because I think I'm much more interested in people's feelings and emotions through art, and a website, a well-designed website can be art, right? So that I don't I don't but I do think that there's this level that AI adds of, you know, um, helping code things quicker, launch things faster, whatever it is, replicate things, create, a certain type of content, not necessarily, don't create your about page through ChatGPT, but there's like a level of, okay, if I'm trying to broaden a little bit about a service offering that we're doing, get get AI to potentially like refine it a bit, make it sound, don't make it like, certainly don't get it to add its tone of voice or anything like that into it,
Yeah.
but at least be like, what am I missing here? And utilizing AI to kind of, as, I mean, it's essentially, it's like a being in a group at school, right? It's like you're bouncing ideas off something, you're getting another idea. I don't think it should ever replace some sort of the creative side of things.
I so agree. I use AI all the time, but just for that, like ideas or a first draft of something that I go back and rewrite in my voice. Like, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, it's great for that. It's scary that that's like where it's going, but like it is the way that things are trending, and you can be a luddite and can, you know potentially just turn your back on this. But I also think that it's knowing how to utilize a tool like that, where it's not going to get in your way. It's only going to help you creatively, and not to create the art, right? But to refine it and be a teacher for you, or help you do research around things. I think too, it used to take us, when we would build websites, back in 2014, 2015, we were we were building websites that were taking, you know 3 months at a minimum, because we would be like, all right, we need to do a content document, and then we need to do wireframes, and then we need to do design in Photoshop, and then we need to do, actually develop it, then QA the whole thing. This whole process was so just like, you know, it's crazy. And then you have a template, like you're saying, that basically has all this information in there, and all you have to do is plug it in. Like, you can focus so much more on the quality of the storytelling and the quality of the content.
Yes. That is why I love that process. Like my two most frequent packages that I do for clients are website in a day and website in a week. And they're very similar, but they both start with templates, for that exact reason. Because I am with you. I also used to do that exact same process, until I realized that, why are we recreating the wheel every single time we do this? Like, it always ends up being a similar formula anyway. And once you've done enough websites, you already know instinctually what kinds of content needs to be on what page. And so, with when you're working with a specific client, it's a lot easier to just be able to say, like, okay, for you and what you're trying to communicate, let's do it in this order. Great, love it. Let's rearrange those sections really quick. For this other client, we're going to do it in this order because their audience needs to hear XYZ before they continue scrolling, whatever it is. So yeah, that's why I love the template process, because then, instead of me spending all that time doing all those things, recreating the wheel every single time, I do get to like think a lot more strategically. Okay, like, you have this very cool shot of this product here, or this service, or whatever. Like, where can we put that to make it the most effective? And yeah.
Yeah, there's. I'd be interested to know kind of what your process for a website in a day looks like. Does that literally mean, like, you know, if I'm envisioning this, it's you're sending them, you're getting the inquiry, you're bringing them on board, they're filling out a questionnaire, you're getting assets, and then you're doing some sort of pre-planning before that, that potentially they're going to have to sign off on? Am I describing this right so far?
Yes, kind of. So yeah, so when they sign on to do it, I of course have a questionnaire. I send them a checklist of everything I need. So it's like, any of their photography, any copy that they already have, although I don't require them to have copy beforehand. That's the other thing. I'm not a copywriter, but I am like I don't sell copy services, but I am a copywriter in my own right. So I can guide them through that process. I find that most people, unless they're working with a copywriter beforehand, they have like no idea what order things need to go in. So I'm like, let me just do it for you. I got this. I don't write it for them, but I do like structure it in the way that it's supposed to be. But yeah, so anyway, any content that they're going to put on the site beforehand, I'll have them gather that. And then really just we pick a day, and the day of, we hop on Zoom at 9 a.m. We chat a little bit about everything in their questionnaire, all of their content. And yeah, I usually spend the first like couple hours of the day working on the homepage. I'll send it to them for feedback, usually around 11 or 12. They'll let me know their thoughts. But they've already picked out a template beforehand. So
They have. Gotcha. I was
yeah,
going to say, are they like,
yeah.
whoa, like what happens if they're like, give me a story where someone's been like, whoa, this is not what I had in mind.
It has happened. It definitely has happened where they're like, this is not what I envisioned. And in that case, that wasn't a communication flaw. I think it was more of a flaw of like, okay, maybe this service wasn't for you. Like maybe we should have done the week, or maybe we should have done something more custom, in
Yeah.
which case we course correct then. Half of the game here also is making sure that the person who's booking website in a day should be the kind of person booking
Yeah.
website in a day,
Right.
because like a lot of the time it has to be someone who like is a really quick decision maker, has a very clear vision, like trusts me completely, like has a template they're obsessed with. Like it has to check all those boxes, otherwise it doesn't work. So yeah, but yeah. So I send them the homepage. Usually while they're looking at the homepage, I will like scarf down some lunch. And then yeah, every couple of hours, between 12 and 6 or 7, I'll send them more feedback or more pages for feedback. And then yeah, and then also with website a day, it can't be more than like 6 pages tops. Like there's a page limit here. I can't do like a crazy like involved site in a day, of course. But
And then are you handing them off a live.com? Like, do you push it live that day, or is it more of like,
sometimes. So I've definitely like many times have done that, and that's great. And like how satisfying it is to have that at like 6 or 7 p.m. But oftentimes what happens is, the design will be done, and then because I have, put in lorem ipsum or copy suggestion in places, they have to go back and write their copy. So usually whenever they get their copy back to me, whether it's like a week later or whatever, I just hook up the domain and do all the sort of technical stuff to make their site go live after the fact. But design in a day is like mostly just like the actual design and the layout of everything in a day.
so when if you're doing this and on an 8-hour workday or something, like you're not thinking much about SEO, I would imagine. How important do you think SEO is in general?
Okay, so I do like all the basic SEO setup, like all the meta tags, like descriptions and stuff, but I'm not doing any keyword research for them. That is like a whole separate package. If they wanted to do that, I would do that beforehand, of course. Um, but that is a good question about SEO. I think it only matters if you're going to blog. And if you don't want to blog, then it doesn't matter, and you should just focus your energy elsewhere. That's my hot take.
I agree with you. I think there's certain elements of SEO, especially when it comes to e-commerce, that are kind of requirements. And to me, I guess just being in the industry, it's like they're no brainers. But it's like, yeah, meta titles, meta descriptions. I mean, you don't even need to. If you have a good product description, sometimes that can suffice. Your product titles, but like also just like you know like fixing any dead links, things like this needs to be done. But getting outside of that, as long as your product feed is set up in, Google Search Console and Merchant Center and you have the accurate things, I feel like some light monitoring is all you need from an SEO standpoint. And the more and more that we get into, Google utilizing search, AI as like the top kind of search feature that you'll see, the less important I think actual traditional SEO becomes, which is not necessarily a hot take. I don't think. I think a lot of people probably feel that way. But I do think that, especially with you're dealing with this, with the type of client that you're describing, people can conflate SEO and all of this stuff, and then like, why? How do you handle that? What's your kind of like? What's the best practice to, if you're a small business, what's the best practice for SEO?
Yeah. Okay, so that's a good point about e-commerce. I guess I don't really do a lot of like e-commerce sites, although I would love to get into that someday. So I could see where that would be more like important for them. I think it really depends because like I personally care about my SEO because I want to be like a top ranked designer for the specific platform that I design for. Granted, that platform like the search, okay, for example, I rank for show it template customization, and that's obviously not a search that is getting it's I think it's like 400 a month or something last time I looked. Like it's not like Squarespace template customization, you know what I mean? It's pretty niche, like a certain kind of client is looking for that. And so like I want to rank for that because I'm like, okay, like if 400 people are searching that a month, I want to be one of the first three people there. That's great. But if it just depends on what they're trying to rank for because at the end of the day, like most of my clients can only take on like 10 clients a year or something. You know what I mean? Like it if they want to rank for New York City wedding photographer, I'm like, maybe you don't. You're going to be getting 87 billion hundred inquiries all the time.
Yeah,
Like, and if you're already pretty booked, like if you're booked enough to care about having this stunning website and hire me, then maybe, you don't need to worry about that so much. So it kind of just depends. Like, I think if your business model is low cost, high volume, then SEO I think really matters. But I think you're right. For the kinds of clients I work with, they're high cost, low volume usually. Um, so yeah, I don't think it's as like crazy important.
yeah. I think that too. The focus, the same way that you describe a little bit of this, the way that you approach TikTok and social is the same way you should approach SEO, which is what you're describing. It's like we should be pretty narrow on what we're trying to get here. And also NYC photographer, I'm sorry, if you're launching a website right now, you're not going to rank for NYC photographer. It's
Exactly.
just not
That's the thing.
possible. Um, and, but if we can get a little bit more narrowed down and think about the storytelling aspect, and really SEO comes down to, okay, how are we building the site out? How are we telling the story for this very specific type of thing? And I think that that is like the most important thing to convey to small businesses is be as narrow as you can here. Like, if you're an interior designer, you can't just be an interior designer. There needs to be like, what is going to be, if someone comes to your website, they can't just say, oh, interior designer. They need to say, interior designer for farmhouse style, blah, blah, blah. Like they need to be like, this person is for me. This is my specific aesthetic. And I think that, that coaching for the clients comes in a lot when you build websites, right? Like you become a consultant in a way for like business strategy by just doing this.
Yeah, that is so true. I definitely like I have so much more so many more business opinions now than when I first started solely because I've been forced to like learn and have them. Also because like as a web designer get to learn about a lot of different business models
Yeah.
and how people conduct their businesses. So I do have like a lot of knowledge now and a lot of opinions, but it is kind of funny. Like no one tells you when you sign up to be a web designer that you actually end up becoming a business
Right,
strategist.
exactly. Yeah, it's funny. It's like it makes complete sense, but there you, you do feel a little more qualified to at least weigh in because you've seen it. I've seen more businesses fail than I've seen succeed in doing this for, 12 years, right? Like there it comes and goes pretty quickly. So there's a lot of you're like, I kind of sense that this is going to go, but you never know, really. And I think that's why it's important, especially nowadays, to just stay pretty narrow and stay focused and create this way. I mean, I, I'm, I'm interested to know too, like, you know, when you're thinking about the brand aspect of this, when you're building a website, if they don't have a great brand in place already, how much of the storytelling aspect are you actually able to add in 9 hours?
Yeah, it depends. I personally focus way less on logo development because I don't think it matters as much. Like, unless you're like Target or Verizon or Walmart, I kind of feel like that doesn't really matter as much, at least for the people that I work with. Because again, people are working with them because of them, not because of like their logo. But I do think fonts are really important and obviously color. So if someone comes to me with a brand that's like, I don't know, like feeling lackluster or wrong for them, I straight up will challenge that. And I will be like, when I show them that first homepage draft, I will certainly be like, what if we changed it to this font and this type suite and like tweaked these colors a little bit? And usually when I show it to them, they're like, oh yeah, that looks way better. Like, great, keep going. So yes, I do end up like playing with that kind of thing a lot in the day. And if it's a longer process, like if we're doing the week or a custom project, oftentimes I will just straight up redo everything. But I mean, of course, like if they're okay with that and chill with that, but oftentimes they're like, yeah, just do whatever you want. I trust you. So
Well, I love it. I'm definitely like a fan of the templatized style for small businesses. I think as the business grows, right, it it becomes a little harder. But we do see that we work with brands that are doing $50 million in e-commerce a year, and they're running on Shopify templates, and um, it can be done. And I think as you add more complexity to your code, the burden of technical debt that you just accumulate from something like that is not worth the return on the customization. I do think that there is a use case for, customized websites. Obviously, I don't think that that art is going to die, but I think that there is more and more from a small business side of things. And even if you think about how the website is used now, right? Like websites in general they're, how many websites are you visiting for a specific type of thing, right?
yeah,
It's you're discovering things on social. You're not necessarily going into Google search anymore, going to a .com.
yeah, I so agree. I think, and it's maybe weird to say that as a web designer, but I think that the discoverability and marketing aspect is not really on the website. I mean, the website to me is like your home base where like you can have like your beautiful brand and like show people that you are legit and professional and like know what you're doing. And if they give you your money, like you're definitely going to provide something to them. Like I think that's the important part of a website now. But I also think the discoverability is completely 100% on social.
Yeah, no, that's a good. I mean, it's basically a way to validate a
Yeah.
business, right? You're essentially going there and making sure that they are legit for sure. Well, it's been great having you, Sarah. Where can people find you? I love your TikTok. What's your TikTok name? So,
My TikTok is Skleist, so Kleist, Kleist. And yeah, I need to get back to posting on there. I've taken a little hiatus because I want to figure out what I want that platform to be. I don't know. I feel like I've gone through many different eras. But I left my greatest hits up there if anyone wants to
Yeah.
watch and see what I've put on there. Yeah, and then my website is sarahclace.com. So yeah.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate you sharing it, and definitely connect soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.